Electrophoresis, DNA samples are put into wells at the negatively charged end of the gel. When an electrical current is run through the agarose gel, DNA fragments move towards the positively charged end of the gel because they have a negative charge. Smaller fragments migrate faster and farther than larger fragments. Each fragment is made up of a variable number of tandem repeats, or VNTRs, or short sequences of repeated nucleotides within the DNA that usually travel together. Dr. Bloom was the victim of an attempted murder, and Will Graham witnessed the crime. At the crime scene, 2 strands of hair were found. We took DNA samples from 2 different loci of the following: the hair strands, Dr. Bloom, Will Graham, and 4 suspects. Keep in mind that in order for a hair to be identified as belonging to a person, the bands between the hair and the individual need to match at both loci, not just one. Here are the results for the first locus. Notice that there are lines that run across the gel. I drew these for convenience of finding matching bands, but note that these will not appear in any electrophoresis gel. Let's see if Dr. Bloom matches any of the hairs. She matches all bands for hair 1, but none for hair 2, which means that hair 1 could be hers, but hair 2 is not hers. Let's look at Will Graham. He matches all bands for hair 2, but none for hair 1, which means that hair 1 could not be his, but hair 2 could be. How about Lecter? He only matches 2 bands for hair 1 and none for hair 2, so neither could be his. How about Garrett Hobbs? He matches 1 band with hair 1 and 2 bands with hair 2, but he does not match all bands for either, so neither could be his. How about Abigail Hobbs? Well, notice that her bands match Will Graham's, who also happens to match with Chilton's. So we know that these 3 people match all bands with hair 2. From locus 1, we know that hair 1 could be Dr. Bloom's and hair 2 could be Graham's, Abigail Hobbs, or Chilton's. On to locus 2. Does Dr. Bloom match either hair strand? She does match all bands with hair 1 and none with hair 2, so we now know that hair 1 is hers since she matched all bands on both loci. This makes sense since she is the victim. How about Will Graham? He doesn't match any, so we can eliminate him as being the perpetrator since he only matched with 1 locus, not both. What about Abigail Hobbs? She only matches with 2 bands from hair 2, so we can eliminate her as being the perpetrator since she only matched at 1 locus. Finally, let's look at Chilton. He matches all bands for hair 2 at this locus, as well as the other, so we have identified him as the perpetrator. So, in summary, we have identified that hair 1 was Dr. Bloom's and hair 2 is Frederick Chilton's. Now, I'm going to point out something interesting. Garrett Hobbs is supposedly the father of Abigail Hobbs. Look at their bands at locus 1. They match half of their bands with each other. Now let's look at locus 2. Half of their bands match here too. This will happen at all of their loci because Garrett is the biological father of Abigail. Each parent donates half of their genetic material to their children, so every locus contains half of the mother's genetic material and half of the father's.